Welcome back to Beyond HR, where we explore how AI is reshaping the human side of work. I'm Shveta Malhan.
And I'm Jeff Wellstead. And today's episode hits close to home for a lot of HR folks, especially if you've ever been asked to make a policy more clear for the fifth time.
Yeah, and let's be honest, most HR policies read like legal disclaimers. And when an employee or a manager can't understand them, what do? They contact HR, they escalate, or worse, they guess and risk non compliance.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really a lose-lose. Nobody wins in this scenario. HR teams get bogged down with, these repetitive questions, and employees feel frustrated, excluded, and just completely in the dark about what the policy is. And in areas like hybrid work, as an example, or even remote work, which is even more challenging, or DEI, or leave policies, or just unclear policies generally, can just lead to a real breakdown in trust between the employees and HR.
Yeah, absolutely. And the organization has already invested time and energy in creating a rich policy. I mean, where it falls down is when people can't understand and interpret it the way the organization's original intent was. So maybe this is where Gen AI comes in. And today we'll walk you through how you can use a large language model to make a dense, complicated HR policy turn into something your employees can actually use and understand. And before we jump into the demo, like we always do, Jeff, let's unpack the why behind it. Why HR policies often end up confusing. Because I'm sure an organization's intention is not to make it so dense that people can't read it. So it's rarely intentional, but it's a balancing act between compliance, practicality, and resource constraints, in my opinion.
Nate, you're spot on. Look, I've had to do this because I do a lot of work with startup companies and building out an HR function from scratch often. And of course, one of the first things on the agenda is build us an employee handbook. And what they mean by that is put together all of the policies that basically will protect the company from a regulatory environment perspective and all of those complexities, which over here in Europe are seemingly insurmountable some days, I have to say, but also, make sure people understand, how this works. By the way, Jeff, I know we have headquarters here in the UK, but we also have now offices in France and Germany and Lithuania, Estonia, Hungary, and we're looking to open up offices in Italy and Spain as well, possibly Portugal. Could you do me a favor and make sure it's a one size fits all? Just, do that. I'm like, okay, that's challenging. The other issue is that these things become outdated, right? Or ever evolving. You take artificial intelligence, for example, that's brand new to the regulatory regime here in the EU and the UK, and people just they don't know what to do with it. So what they do is they keep kind of revolving in experts to kind of review it and to tweak it and to vote on it, and so that's always ever changing. And there's just been like a massive overhaul of employment law based on the parties over here in the UK that have just changed hands. So the conservatives are out, the liberals are in, and not the liberals, sorry, the Labour Party is in. And there was this huge sweeping, kind of revamping of regulation. So that's another thing you have to kind of consider about. And then, lack of resources and expertise. I mean, if you're a smaller company, it's really hard to kind of spend the money or find the money, frankly, to pay an employment attorney to go and put together at least all of the kind of core critical regulatory, statutory, they love that term over here, requirements for you so that at least minimally you have an employee handbook that protects the company, right? But you ask a lawyer to do that, and what comes back, of course, is yes, perfectly fit for purpose in terms of, protecting the company. What it screams to employees is, we don't trust you.
Mhm.
Here are the guardrails within which you need to operate. And if you go outside of those, you're going to be in trouble. And that is not going to be the way we want to kind of communicate with people in terms of creating an employee first environment. The communication on this stuff can be a train wreck, right? Because just posting it to your intranet internally or SharePoint or whatever tool you use for it, it doesn't really do it. It doesn't bring it to life, and nobody is going to read it. I mean, my God, I can't tell you how many times I rewrote these policies, and I hate rewriting policies and building out handbooks. I can't imagine what it feels like to an employee, especially
Yeah.
salespeople or marketers or whatever the case. It's just like, they freeze up and they're like, mate, I don't have time or headspace for this. Can you do me a favor and just tell me, punchline, what do I need to know?
Yeah.
So this is the issue, is that we have this requirement, right, for every business on the planet. We have this thing conundrum where we want to kind of create an incredible employee experience, yet we want to stay on the right side of regulation and always ever be seen to be doing the right thing. How do we fix that?
Yeah. Yeah. And don't even get me started about communication and training, because if you have 5, 10, 15 policies, yes, you can train and communicate about them when somebody joins as part of your onboarding experience. But who is going to remember the details of the policy? Somebody might have read about, let's say, mat leave policy when they joined, but they didn't have to act on it 2 years down the road. Like that training retention is not going to stick
No,
with me for 2 years. It's not relevant. It's not timely. It's not delivered, to your point, from an employee experience perspective in mind. So the issue isn't just the policy text. It's the system behind how we write, review, and share policies in the organization.
indeed. Yeah. And just to kind of like throw something in there, the maternity policy, the paternity policy, and then the family leave policy are three separate policies in the UK,
Yeah.
which take up as many as 9 pages. Even if you looked at it fresh, you still wouldn't understand, what are my rights? What does it undo? How is this going
Yeah.
to work? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard.
And this is definitely where AI can help solve, not replace, the need for having a legal counsel or HR people to develop policy, but make this experience much more easier, again, for all parties involved in policy making. But before we jump into the demo, Jeff, I'd also love for us to touch on the numbers, because it's not just about making the life of the employee easier. There is a huge dollar figure attached to the negative impacts of if policies are not designed, delivered in a way that gets the outcome that we are hoping to achieve from them.
They sure are. It's unbelievable. I mean, as with so many things in human resources, right? First of all, people are our greatest expense in almost all cases. And so we start from that basis, but that also means that the price tag associated with those people becomes a massive impact when, God forbid, we have to defend the company in a lawsuit based on the fact that there was either a misinterpretation of a policy, or there was an accusation that there is no policy, or that it wasn't clear, it wasn't made, and, the median judgment for a case like that, at least sort of in the North American region, is like $200,000, right? They're trying to make it a little bit tougher to kind of take companies to tribunal over here. Having said that, it happens all the time. And the tribunal court cases are just backed up forever. So the Equal Opportunity Employment, kind of commission, the 2023 recovery, 665 million from workplace discrimination cases alone. Turnover costs. This is a huge one that people don't understand. So in other words, when people are leaving the company who you wanted to stay, typically it's your top performers.
Yeah,
Um, and, replacing an $80,000 a year employee can cost you anywhere between 40 and 60,000 to do so. And how do we get there? It's not just the salary. It's not just the compensation package. It's the benefits, which is like 35% of that person's salary. It is the loss of productivity when that person has
yeah,
left and is not filled for a period of time. It is then the training costs of a new person hired after you, by the way, pay for the recruitment fee. That person comes to the desk and they're like, what do I do? When do I even start? And it's going to take another possibly 2, 3, 4 months to get that person up to full productivity. That costs a lot of money, and you don't want to repeat that. It's unrecoverable as well. Productivity losses, right? And this is another thing that's kind of vague for most HR folks, but conflict costs in terms of people just not agreeing, not working things through, and all that kind of thing could basically cost you, as it's been estimated to cost you, as much as 359 billion a year in paid hours. Disengaged employees, I refer to them as zombie employees. This notion of quiet quitting, right? I can't afford to quit. I don't really like it here. I'm not happy here.
yeah,
I'm frankly I don't think I'm being treated fairly. So I'm going to not do a lot, frankly, to help this company out. Those disengaged employees cause a decrease of 18% in productivity, and 15% in profitability. Those are huge numbers when you start adding those up. And for a 10,000 person, employee, sorry, or 10,000 employees, that is approximately 60 million in lost productivity. That's so you add all those things up, and I'll tell you what, the headwinds that businesses face in terms of getting this stuff wrong are massive.
Yeah, yeah. So, given the picture that you painted, Jeff, it's very, very clear that we can't think about this as just a HR issue. We have to think about it as a business issue because there is a financial impact for not solving for the challenges that you listed earlier around policies and addressing the root causes of why the current state of policy creation and execution and delivery is just not working in our work environments.
Correct.
So let's do the demo, jump into the demo
Yeah,
now.
this will be good. As you're doing that, if I can provide a little bit of context, a little bit of background. So, as I mentioned, gosh, ever since about 2004, I have been working with fast growth startup tech and biotech companies, typically building HR from scratch. And a big portion of that was always hey, we don't have any policies written down. We know that we need to. They're written all over the place. We're sending people to look at websites online to kind of get a clue about certain things. That is just not going to work. So can you please fix this for us quite quickly? Because I just feel like we're exposed. And then of course we'd have to go ahead and get to work. Oftentimes the case is I am the only HR person there, right? And the budget says you're probably going to get another HR person in 6 months from now, but that's probably about it. And I'm not going to be hiring any kind of legal brilliant genius to kind of come in and automatically do this. So oftentimes it's outsourced to, the legal firm that's supporting the company. And we get the employment law person on the phone. They're like, great, yeah, I'll help you out. That's great. There's like 25 policies that you absolutely have to have in place as statutory required. And then the rest of them, quite frankly, are up to you. But I will just give you some headers and tell you what some of my clients are doing. And so it's great. So good, brilliant, awesome. And I was working for a company that was fully remote and only ever had something like 12 people in the office at a time. So remote was everything. And what we decided to do here is I wanted to kind of borrow that and sanitize it, of course, and kind of go through this rather lengthy and painful remote work policy and see if we can't, through the use of generative AI, and Shveta's incredible prowess and capability in that regard, make this a lot more of a human document whilst also preserving the protections inherent in there, right, for the company itself. But to bring this to a state where people can look at it, they get it. It's actually fun to read, possibly, because it flows and it makes sense. So that's what we're going to kind of go and try and tackle. But what you're about to see in the raw is how it is. I received this policy from our employment lawyer.
Yeah. I wish I could take the credit for simplifying it. I am just delegating the work to AI.
Well, yeah, of course, that is always ever the punchline here, too. Yeah, AI is doing the thinking.
Uh,
Having said that, though, let me just kind of call this out too. This is not just a fly, a click and forget exercise. It does not instantaneously fix it, and especially around policies, you need to be careful that there are always certain critical components that are addressed, right? Um, and so you need a brain going into this. You need critical thinking. You need knowledge of employment law going into this, because what you don't want to do is take a rigidly structured, but nonetheless perfectly structured, employment law attorney viewpoint on a policy, and then basically have AI hack it up, and basically take a look at it and suddenly realize, oh gosh, there's like 10 things in here that need to be put back into this version, because if we don't have those things, we could be in trouble. So this isn't a click and forget. This is basically an exercise where your human resource experience is really essential. And again, your collaboration with your employment attorneys as well. But there's a way to say this stuff to people that is really critical, because you need them to kind of internalize this, to really understand how this stuff works and not make it difficult for them to do so.
yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
That's a really important point that you talk about, Jeff, because again, to your point, we are not saying that use AI and overhaul all your policies and just deploy the new ones that you've got from AI. This is where you have to have a system around Yes, we used AI to simplify the policy, but maybe have a review cycle if you don't have that expertise with the legal counsel again, validate, vet it before deploying it into your ecosystem. So this is not about cutting corners, it's about mm, s- s- solving for the capacity issue that typically an HR person might have to personalize it and simplify it for everybody in the organization.
Indeed. Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. So let's upload the policy that you shared, which,
Which is huge.
yeah. So this one, I have it attached as a PDF for
Okay.
people who are curious to see what's in the policy. I will link it to the published version of this episode so they can see how big and complicated the policy was.
Yeah, cool.
And like always, my screen share chooses to just
Stop
no
sharing.
longer do the screen share. So here we
Oh,
are
there you
back.
go.
All right. So maybe before we go into simplifying, because people can't see the details of the policy, maybe we ask ChatGPT to tell us, is this employee friendly language in the policy? And if not,
Sure.
why not?
Yeah, good idea.
Have a look at this policy and let me know if this is written in employee friendly language. And if it is not, tell me why. Let's see
Now,
what
did
it
you have to set, is this still operating within the confines of the GPT that you've already set up? So you've already kind of built a context around it being particularly intelligent about employment law, or did you just basically kind of just do this raw? Just
This
set it
is
out there.
raw, but
Right. Cool.
you make a really good point. Like for an organization who wants to do this at scale, having a custom GPT which is tailored to your organization's nuances and context would be a great place to start.
Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. What do we got here then?
So it says, thank you for sharing. Overall, the document is comprehensive and professionally written, but from employee experience and engagement lens, it could be more employee friendly in tone and approach.
Undoubtedly. So this is cool. Then it goes into more detail, right? It starts talking about employee friendly elements,
Yeah.
which this to me is a learning, component for HR folks. What is the language behind what it is I'm trying to get done here? And how do I start to kind of parse it out so I can think it through and fix
Yeah.
it?
And I love it that every time we ask a large language model for their opinion, they always give us a balanced, or maybe it's the GPT that I'm working with, gives me a balanced perspective on what's working and what's not working so that
Okay.
I can see it from both lens. Like it started with, here are the three things that are working well in your policy. And here are the areas that could be more employee friendly, like tone and language, definitely, which is a classic issue with all policies. Lack of empowering language, the trust element that you talked about earlier, Jeff,
Yep. Indeed.
one-sided responsibility, and rigid language around flexibility. And then it gives us suggestions.
Yeah, this is great. This is a huge unlock for me, right? Because I don't know what it is. And I wasn't built basically maybe to be a hyper detailed HR person when it comes to this sort of thing. But I literally freeze up when I start to see the size of this fix. And I'm like, my God, I have to do this for 26 policies. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And all by yourself. This to me is a huge unlock because it helps me, even though it's not perfect, maybe, and it may have missed a thing or two. But wow, it gets my wheels turning. And it gets me thinking in the framework of solving the problem. And now I have a partner to do that, who, by the way, isn't tired, who loves detail and who loves analysis and will do this all day long for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like a bit of a gift, really.
It totally is. And we talk about HR feeling overwhelmed because they are in transactional work. Here's an example of how we can liberate ourselves from that transactional work and buy some capacity to do other things.
Indeed.
All right, so let's use another prompt to now see how it can rewrite the policy for us. So I'm just writing a simple prompt to say, rewrite the following HR policy in plain English so that it's easy for an employee or a manager to understand, avoid legal jargon.
Very cool. Right. I love how it titles it Remote Work Policy in Plain English. Brilliant. Brilliant characterization.
Yeah.
Right. So you're seeing this now, Shweta, from a relatively new pair of eyes looking at this. How does this hit you in terms of the way that ChatGPT has decided to help us with it?
Honestly, I feel like, first of all, reading it more often than not, when you open a policy document in the organization, the way the information is structured, the way it's written, it just, you don't feel encouraged to go through the policy,
No.
because the mind already thinks of it as a blocker, and they're like, oh, it's easy for me to just reach out to somebody who can interpret it for me, you know?
Yeah, you feel like you're being punished almost, right? Like you have to go through this hell of scraping the data. And there surely must be somebody who loves doing this that I can borrow from.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So here, the way it's structured, I'm like, oh, it's just like a few bullet points, easy to read. Let me just quickly look at it and read it. So this has solved for one challenge, making the language in the policy simpler and easier to read. But then we can take it to the next level too. Like, sometimes in a policy, there are so many nuances and fine print that exist that sometimes you just need to have an answer to a quick question. You don't have to read the whole policy. So again, imagine converting this policy into an FAQ style document, which you can post on your intranet. That also is a resource intensive activity. And that's where we can just jump in and quickly now ask ChatGPT, which is what we are using. Whichever LLM you end up using, you just ask that LLM. Now, I like this format. Convert this into an FAQ format for employees and include at least 5 questions and answers. And you can ask it to create 10, 7, however many.
However many, yeah. Very good. Let's see how it does it. Oh, this is great. This makes it so much more kind of confidential, conversational is what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say. And it
yeah,
just feels like I can learn in the flow now because these are the
yeah.
questions in my head. The only thing that would make this better is if it was, a chatbot, if somebody could just say it to me, you know what I mean? And I bet you we might be able to make that happen. I have no idea. It's got to be
Yeah,
a way.
that's
This is
really
great.
the next version where we can take this policy experience, because creating chatbots is not easy. The challenge with chatbots, again, is what experience we get from the chatbot depends on how we've trained the bot, what information we've given the bot. Again, if you have a policy, let me just share my screen again. If you have a policy that's already written in a format that works and aligns to the tone and the language you want to use in your organization, I mean, we just tell GPT to do the work for us. You just say, create a chatbot script
All
that
right.
can answer the questions about hybrid work requests, or this
Okay.
was remote. Let's see what it does. Again, this has not created the chatbot for us. We can also create a custom GPT trained like a chatbot and give the link to everybody in the organization. That's an easy way where for an organization to test this experience. But now that we have, oh, look at this, it's even given chatbot the name.
I mean, okay. I love it. This is great.
So it's given us everything that we need.
Yeah, bounce you out again.
It's given us everything that we need to supply as content to somebody who's building the chatbot for us. So now HR person is not going to go and start building the chatbot, uh, code it and program it. But imagine now if they give this requirement to the person building, the IT person building, the technologist building the chatbot. Now that experience is going to be, one, so easy between the two parties, and two, the job can be done much more faster, quicker, and in a much more quality enhanced way.
Indeed. Absolutely. It's fascinating.
So see here, it's given us the details, the introductions. So it's giving us the buttons. If our chatbot is designed as buttons, we can click on where we want to go. Um, and if the question is, how do I request to work remotely? It's giving us 4 steps to follow. So it's already simplifying the policy interpretation experience for me as an employee.
Got it. That's amazing. And it changes the whole tone of the conversation too,
Yeah,
because now it's very employee centric. In other words, let me explain it to you in the simplest possible terms. But importantly, let me also point out to you the things that you need to do, the actions you need to take, the people you
yeah,
need to talk to, the forms you need to fill out. And to your point, if we can create a bot, that'd be amazing. Or even a GPT, so that people can just continue to query it and just say, well, I'm not quite sure what you said or what you mean when you say this.
yeah,
And then it's like, oh, sorry about that. Okay, great. Here you go. Let me spell it out for you. And then boom, just like that, you created sort of this layered version of the same policy that looked looked like it just came out of a law book. Um, and it's still very much got its legal integrity. It's spoken in plain English. We've created frequently asked questions documents basically around each one of these things, and a chatbot that basically frames the responses and any queries about these policies in a way that is directed toward the employee specifically, as opposed to HR says, or our employment attorney or legal department and compliance departments say, blah, 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 right? It's none of that. It is, this is for you. And this is how you need to understand it. So it's brilliant.
yeah. Absolutely. And if I was an HR person accountable for making this switch of enhancing the policy consumption experience in my organization, I would create this content that we are sharing with our audience, package it together in one document or multiple documents, have the original policy document and the new content that we've created and package it and ship it to the legal counsel saying, here's the original policy and here's how we are planning to reword and rewrite it and deliver it to our employees. Can you do a quick review and see if there are any blind spots or things that we have
Totally.
not caught from a legal lens? Again, another experience enhancer between different stakeholders that HR has to work with as they go towards enhancing the HR experience for the rest of the organization. I mean, if our partnership experience with stakeholders improves, then we also build our credibility because now we are making life easier for other stakeholders to play with us
Yeah, quite.
instead of going to legal counsel and say, this is not good, this is not helping me. You do the work of simplifying it. Now we're making their life easier to say, this is how we've simplified it. I
Yeah.
just need your stamp of approval on it.
Indeed. And part of the other challenge, I'll just lob this in there too, because it's the reality that HR faces, is that you get a lot of people who will call you and say, look, I get the policy, nicely worded. That's great. It was pretty easy to understand. I think I understand it. You just validate that obviously as the HR person to ensure the understanding is the same as yours. But then they say, but what about an exception?
Mm,
And if I need to, how do I get approval for that? And if I have to, how do I kind of escalate this? Because it's really important to me. Maybe an extension of maternity or paternity leave or whatever the circumstance. Um, so that's always a thing too to have in mind in terms of being able to go back to, your chat GPT and say, this is interesting. How would you deal with this, or how flexible do you feel our policy is in terms of allowing this? Not necessarily to get a definitive answer, because that's the sort of answer that, of course, a human is going to have to make. It's a judgment decision. But it's kind of nice to get some options, right? To have a tool help think through, what are the possible outcomes? What are the possible consequences of allowing this particular exception. So
yeah,
that's another thing too that is super super helpful, or has been for me anyway.
yeah. Before we jump to the next segment, I wanted to also quickly share that we can, again, like if we look at mapping out the experience first, like what kind of experience do we want to deliver to our employees, then we can look back and reverse engineer what all content pieces do we need to put in place to deliver that experience. And one such thing would be keywords, because employees typically use keywords on
Yeah,
your intranet to search for policies and whatnot. So when the policies are put on intranet, whether in their original form or in the enhanced form that we are showing right now, we'll also have to provide keywords that would be attached as meta tags to the assets that we produce. So again, we don't have to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes imagining what the best keywords would be. I wanted to show a quick example of how you can again use AI to do the heavy lifting, and you
Cool.
don't have to use what it produces 100%. But if it can get us 80% closer to where we want it to go, that's efficiency.
Yeah, sure is. Well, I mean, there's nothing worse, right? Shweta, when first of all you have to go look up an HR policy, right? And then second of all, you have no idea where it is and how it is to kind of get to it. That's possibly just, insult layered upon insult, which is, forget your day job, forget what it is you're actually meant to be really focused on, and instead spend half your day trying to kind of, hunt down complicated HR policies. So that's a great way to solve for it.
Yeah, yeah. So I gave it a very simple prompt. I said, create keywords that enhance the searchability of this policy on the intranet.
Okay.
Let's see what it gives us.
Yeah, this is like this is like one of those soul destroying tasks, right? Like if you had to manually sit there and start to scribble in or type it into some kind of a system to say this is how we're going to search for it, and this automatically does it.
Yeah. So it's giving us the primary keywords. It's also thinking about how would people actually search intranet to look for this policy. It's also pulled out the logistics tools and equipment kind of questions that
All
people
right,
might have.
cool,
Security. So it's bucketed all these key phrases and keywords into categories that people will typically search for this
clever.
policy with.
Well, and this is what I think the large language models are brilliant for, right? They know words. They understand how tokens fit together most probably. And this is the kind of stuff they excel at. They can absolutely crush it in a second. And it's wonderful to have this done for you. I mean, we used to pay computer companies, right, to come in and do these sorts of things for us. And they'd be working on this stuff for like 6 months, charging a fortune. And now it's like, boom, you just got that done in how long? How long
Like
did it take you?
less than half an hour?
Yeah. I mean, that's well, less than half an hour to do everything. But I mean, just to do this, it took you literally all of 30 seconds.
Exactly.
It's like done.
Exactly. So the
Yeah,
power is now in our imagination, not in being the expert to do the thing.
indeed.
All right. So let's get into, before we wrap up, some real world tips and how do we ensure governance. So when we go about doing this work in our organizational context, Jeff, what would be your recommendations for organizations that are convinced that they want to solve for this? How should they go about doing it?
Well, look, like anything else, you don't do this wholesale. You don't have to fix or, as they say, boil the ocean, right? All in one. Pick a policy, a particular confusing policy. For instance, like maternity leave over here in the UK, which is, again, 6 pages long. And it goes on and on and on. Use GPT basically to rewrite it, say in 3 different formats. Give me a plain English. And when I say plain English, I want it in a way that I can explain it to anybody. Build out a frequently asked questions document, an FAQ document, and put it into sort of question and answer form. That's a great way to kind of like just have stuff flow into people's brains. And even more importantly and much more usefully, create a chatbot around it. Build ChatGPT, and we'll cover that off in another session, but it's not hard to do. What you're doing is basically you're giving GPT, a particular unit of GPT, its own identity and training it with all of your material. So it gets to understand the context within which you're always ever operating. And it just makes life so much simpler so that you can just ask it, one-line questions and it does it. Have legal review it. Always have legal review it just to make sure. And of course, they're always going to be a little bit persnickety, at least the lawyers I've always dealt with, but show them the before and the after and basically the work that you did in between. And one thing I'll just lob in there too is that when you're asking GPT in this particular instance to make these changes, you can also ask it to log the changes that it made, right? And so, say, put it into a sidebar or just explain it in a quick paragraph just so I know which things have been modified. That's super helpful for your legal review as well. And then embed it, when you're happy with it, embed it into your onboarding, into your help desk. Just make it ubiquitous and available to everybody. Put it on Slack, put it on Teams, wherever it is, SharePoint, wherever it is you store this stuff. make sure it's highly available, that it's always ever accurate and updated, and that it's just dead easy to understand.
Yeah, yeah. So clear policies are about cost saving, trust building, and engagement boosting. So they're no longer nice to have anymore. We have
No.
to embark on this journey. And the best part, like you called out, is that we can start with one policy, one prompt, and one big impact.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's where we'll wrap our conversation today. So thank you for tuning in to Beyond HR. If this episode gave you a new way to think about policy and policy reshaping in your organization, share it with a colleague or drop us a comment. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.